Hello, welcome to Intro to Addiction. This textbook is designed to help you clarify, identify, and comprehend the many confounding variables that influence substance use disorders. Chapter 1 emphasizes the problems in perception that have misdirected efforts toward effective approaches to alcohol and drug prevention, intervention, and treatment efforts. This chapter provides you with the basis for understanding the most common perspectives, models, and theories. You will need to understand the perspectives to develop your own unique perspective, which you will put together for assignment number 1. Here are the learning objectives for Chapter 1. Information is presented on the failed tactics to the prevention of drug abuse, including scare tactics. This chapter also covers the alcohol-related problems on college campuses and an up-to-date review of the most recent trends of drug use among high schoolers. Pay close attention in your textbook on the 4 major perspectives on alcohol and drug use. Assignment number 1 is to answer a questionnaire and to write a 3-page paper on your own personal perspective. Well, at least at this point in your career development. From the 1930s to the 1960s, public and private responses to alcohol and drug abuse caused tremendous damage, which we are still trying to overcome. Scare tactics are a politically biased approach that usually alienates young people. Those using scare tactics in the past assumed that if young people were frightened by the adverse reactions to drug use, they would also be too frightened to use the drugs. Early drug prevention efforts in the 1970s then turned to providing drug-specific information. The assumption here was that if young people were to receive credible drug-specific information, then they would wisely choose not to use drugs. Unfortunately, the reverse held true. Drug-specific information heightened curiosity and alleviated fears associated with drug use, resulting in increases of drug use by young people. The DARE program is an example of the early 1970s prevention program that failed in this regards. Supply-side approaches aim to eradicate drug availability. Examples of supply-side approaches include military interventions in countries that grow various drugs. Another example is to focus on destroying the smuggling efforts and the drug trafficking and the bringing drugs into the United States. Other examples also include making it difficult to secure drugs once they are in the United States, such as taxation, price increases, and age restrictions. Law enforcement efforts on the streets include cracking down on drug dealing, and also in the case of prescription drug abuse, to make the formularies of the medications, for example, harder to abuse the prescription drug, to increase regulations for prescriptions, and otherwise making it harder to get the drugs. Supply-side approaches are not bad, negative, or ineffective. It is usually just not coordinated with the demand-side interventions. Federal funding historically has been more heavily weighted towards the supply side. Just to compare and contrast to the demand side. The demand side is the individual environmental and cultural environmental factors that lead to demands for drugs. Examples of demand-side approaches include psychological factors of the individual, genetic makeup of the individual, which makes them more susceptible to drug use, and demand-side approaches also include the availability of drugs or alcohol in a neighborhood, the advertising efforts that increase the demand for drug or alcohol. Demand-side interventions include things like drug education, counter-advertising efforts to the alcohol industry, for example. Demand side also includes availability of treatment for the amelioration of the underlying psychological and mental health issues related to substance use disorders. Another example is the reason that many people drink alcohol is that they are bored. Demand side reduction then would increase activities for youth that are healthy, non-drug related, family-oriented, and that are fun or not boring. Again, demand-side approaches are not bad, ineffective, or wrong. It's just that sometimes demand-side approaches are not funded to the level necessary for effectiveness. Demand-side approaches are not coordinated with supply-side approaches. A more collaborative effort is more effective. An example of this would be wherein supply-side approaches are working with demand-side approaches are early intervention approaches. For example, law enforcement roll up upon a drug dealing and realize that the person being arrested may benefit from treatment. Another collaborative example is the adult drug court, wherein offenders are arrested for felony drug offenses, thus getting them off the street, a supply-side approach, but then offering treatment, a demand-side approach, in lieu of incarceration, because there is an awareness that treatment may be effective in the long run. Just Say No campaign was a real thing in the 1980s by First Lady Nancy Reagan. A simplistic and non-comprehensive approach doesn't account for complex issues such as the family environment of the adolescent, nor the genetic makeup of the individual. Binge drinking is a significant problem on college campuses. Research indicates that 40 to 45% of college students binge drink. The first 6 weeks of a new school year are certainly party time, as the freshman class is new to college life. For example, in San Luis Obispo City, the arrest fees and fines are double during the first few weeks of Cal Poly, including the week of welcome, as a technique to decrease supply side. Alcohol use on college campuses was first reported to be a problem over a half a century ago. At least half of the sexual assaults on college campuses involve alcohol consumption by the perpetrator, the victim, or both. In your discussion forum for Chapter 1, you will be discussing the various negative consequences of college drinking and discuss which consequences are the most serious for students, families, and the community. These are some of the potential negative consequences that you might want to discuss in your discussion forum. 6 Americans die every day from alcohol poisoning due to binge drinking. Town-gown relations refers to the relationship between the city and the college or the university. A variety of issues from college student drinking are in this category, such as public intoxication, noise due to large and unruly partying at fraternities, other large city apartment complexes, trash and public urination in parks, and drunken city bar corridors. A specific example of this in the San Luis Obispo city has been the celebration of St. Patrick's Day, wherein college students flood the bars in the early morning hours to drink green beer. This may be the same time when families are shopping in the downtown shops, and then young children may witness inappropriate drunken behaviors. So having a great relationship between the college and the university and the city is important to prevent negative consequences. The relative risk of a fatal single vehicle crash with a blood alcohol level of 0.08 to 0.10% varies from 11%, that's for drivers age 35 and older, to a whopping 52% for male drivers age 16 to 20. As a result, many states are instituting stricter guidelines for younger drivers, such as not allowing other young people in the car for the first year of driving. So there are many problems associated with alcohol use, and many of the society problems are listed here. It is estimated that alcohol is involved to 25 to 50% of cases of intimate partner violence. Creative solutions are needed. The continued emphasis on the supply side and the continued neglect of the demand side of the drug problem perpetuates a continued cycle of use and abuse of drugs and alcohol. Despite the high costs of supply-side interventions, there has been no real reduction in the availability of drugs. The current opiate epidemic is indicative of how drug problems continue. Prescription drugs became more expensive on the street, yet the addiction was still present. So individuals turned to heroin in order to continue to feed the addiction. If all of the opium dried up and was unavailable in a natural form, it is likely that a synthetic form of heroin would be developed by someone. Designer drugs are being developed all of the time. However, consider the legalization of illicit drugs. Alcohol is a legal drug, and the societal impacts are well documented, as we just saw indicated in these slides. It is unlikely that legalization will help solve addiction issues for Americans. Treatment and prevention works. We need innovative prevention programs addressing a wide continuum of needs, and we need the whole continuum of treatment services available to everyone who needs it, when they need it, and at a location wherein the person can access the services. We need to continually research and evaluate new treatment modalities and practices. We need to evaluate prevention programs and continue to discover the evidence-based best practices and only disseminate those to everyone. Throughout history, different drugs have become associated with different ethnic groups. Consider how this has changed more recently. Also, consider how this might influence treatment and prevention efforts. Other factors contributing to alcohol and drug problems include poverty, breakdown of the neighborhood, changes in the traditional nuclear and extended family systems, and limited support systems, stress, and trauma impacts. Individuals use alcohol and drugs to numb out and shut down feelings of embitterment, anger, and pain. This puts students in the hands of teachers who lack the talent or motivation to help them overcome academic failure and a poor sense of self. An education system that is healthy and supports drug-free lifestyles can make a difference in students' lives. People begin to experiment with drugs and alcohol as young as age 11. Not everyone experiments, and not everyone goes on to experience problems with drug abuse and addiction. However, the schools are a vital partner in the prevention and treatment of substance use disorders, especially at younger ages. Here are some of the effective solutions to provide reform in the educational system, thus impacting students, families, and communities in a healthy manner. Denial. I don't even know I am lying. It's cyclical. Denial leads to the worsening of the consequences from drug and alcohol use over time, and then the worsening of the symptoms over time results in an increased denial system in order to continue the drug seeking and using behaviors. So it's cyclical. The denial is there, allows the person to continue to use. As they continue to use, their symptoms get worse, which means their denial needs to get bigger or thicker or stronger, and then they can continue to use. It's a cyclical pattern. Destigmatization. The dimensions of addiction that emphasize disease and decrease shame while restoring dignity can help facilitate people admitting that they have a problem. Breaking through denial and helping them to ask for help is important. Public media can address the importance of asking for help and bringing awareness to the impacts on the entire family. Despite the perception of marijuana as being less harmful, between the years 2009 and 2014, students did not necessarily increase their daily marijuana use. See, for example, the 8th and 12th graders. The 2014 scores rates of use are pretty much the same as 2009. However, the 10th graders did increase their marijuana daily drug use. Interestingly, 10th grade is usually the first year of high school. What could be done, do you think, to prevent or intervene in using marijuana on a daily basis, potentially decreasing the stress and adjustments to high school? Interesting ideas can come from data like this to prevent, slow, or stop drug use. As you know, medical marijuana is legalized in a number of states, and not only medical marijuana, we're now moving into the area of legalized recreational marijuana use. In your files menu on the left-hand side, there's a comprehensive compendium of cannabis research. I have just supplied the executive abstract, not the whole big long report. But if you're interested in the issues of marijuana and what does the research actually say, attached you will find that executive summary. So in general, there are four major perspectives on alcohol and drug use. There is no one right or wrong answer when considering how to solve alcohol and drug issues. I'm going to go through each one now. The moral and legal perspective. More recently, criminal justice has been paired with demand-side interventions, such as counseling and treatment. For example, in 2000, in California, Proposition 36 passed to provide treatment in lieu of incarceration. The criminal justice system has been a very collaborative partner and has funded many of the treatment demand-side interventions. Drug courts, as mentioned earlier, are another example of pairing treatment and law enforcement in the community in order to enhance the recovery of individuals and families. Medical health perspective. You will be viewing a video on Addiction Neuroscience 101 by Dr. Corey Waller. This is an excellent 20-minute video that really describes the current research on the medical health perspective. This perspective assumes that people seek good health. However, information alone usually does not change attitudes about the use of drugs and alcohol until there is a crisis. For example, the patient has been diagnosed with lung cancer and then finally decides to stop smoking. You will, in the next module, see the video link for the Neuroscience of Addiction 101. The psychosocial perspective. For example, recovery from substance use disorders promoted through individual counseling, group treatment programs, and addressing negative thinking patterns, low self-esteem, and trauma issue resolution. The sociocultural perspective. According to Edward Breacher in 1992, we should stop viewing the drug problem as primarily a national problem to be solved on a national scale. In fact, he proposes the drug problem is a collection of local problems. By supporting neighborhoods and community local efforts, we could provide an environment that could prevent the development of alcohol and drug problems. What do you think? Would that work? Here's a description of assignment number 1, which is due October 28th. It is worth 25 points. There is the questionnaire on pages 18 and 20 in your textbook. So you'll be answering those questions. And in addition to that, write a 3-page paper on your own perspective. So the 4 perspectives that we just reviewed, what combination or which ones are you leaning towards? There are more instructions in the files menu on the left-hand side, and then you will submit your assignment by uploading it online in the module for assignment number 1. Here are the sample questions that you're going to be answering about your perspective in the questionnaire. There is a perspective of hope. Millions of Americans are in recovery. Adult children of alcoholics are overcoming the trauma of their childhoods. Families are successfully developing more functional and healthy systems for the next generation of youngsters. Treatment options are increasing and more available. Please work through the modules in order and read about the grading rubric for the discussion forum. Generally, the process for each chapter will be that you will read the textbook, watch the PowerPoint, and listen to the lecture, participate in the discussion forum, writing your own response, and reading and commenting on your fellow students' postings. And then you will take the chapter quiz. Good luck!